Let's get right into it. You spend about a third of your life completely unconscious. If you live to be 90, that's 30 years spent drooling on a pillow, maybe twitching a little, completely vulnerable to spiders, axe murderers, or your cat deciding your face is the perfect place to knead some dough. Seems like a massive design flaw, a ridiculous waste of time. So what if we just didn't? What if humans evolved to never ever need to sleep? You might be picturing the utopia. 8 extra hours a day to learn a new language, write a novel, finally get fit, or just grind out more work to get that promotion. It sounds like the ultimate human upgrade, but the reality wouldn't be a 24-hour party. It would be a 24-hour, nonstop, society-breaking nightmare. Because taking away sleep doesn't just give us more time. It fundamentally breaks the human being and the world we've built around our need to power down. Forget the dreams of productivity. We're about to explore the bizarre, terrifying, and downright depressing world of the eternally awake. Think about your day. It's structured in three neat little chunks, a legacy of labor activism from the Industrial Revolution. 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for whatever you want. It's a fragile, often violated treaty we've made with the forces of capitalism. Now imagine a world where that 8 hours for rest, part of the equation, just vanishes. What do you really think happens to those 8 hours? Do they magically become you time? Let's be honest, your boss's eyes would light up like a slot machine hitting the jackpot. The modern 40-hour work week is a social construct, not a law of physics. It exists only because of the biological mandate of sleep. It's the one non-negotiable excuse we all have. Sorry, can't. I need to go into a temporary coma or I'll literally die. But if you remove that biological backstop, the corporate world wouldn't just ask for more of your time, it would feel entitled to it. The first thing to go would be the 9 to 5. It would be replaced by a rolling 16-hour double shift, or maybe three 5.33-hour micro shifts spread across the day to maximize corporate efficiency. Your work notifications wouldn't stop at 6 p.m. They would never stop. Your home, whilst once a sanctuary for unconsciousness, is now just a conveniently located satellite office where you also happen to store your food and your family. The pressure to be always on would transition from a toxic workplace trend into a biological expectation. The hustle culture that people pretend to love on LinkedIn would become the only culture. People who chose not to work 16 hours a day would be seen as lazy, unambitious, and unproductive members of society. The historical fight for the 8-hour day was brutal. People literally fought and died for the weekend, for the concept of having a life outside the factory. In a sleepless world, we'd have to fight that war all over again, but this time our own biology would be working against us. We'd have the capacity for endless labor, and in our economic system, unused capacity is a sin. So no, you wouldn't spend those extra 8 hours learning to play the ukulele. You'd spend them answering emails, sitting in pointless meetings, and slowly realizing that your entire existence has been optimized for someone else's profit margin. You didn't gain 8 hours of life. You just gained a second workday. Your brain is a messy, messy roommate. All day long, while it's busy thinking, feeling, and keeping you from walking into walls, it's also producing a ton of metabolic junk. These are toxic protein byproducts, things like beta amyloid and tau, which are the same gunk famously associated with Alzheimer's disease. During the day, this waste just piles up in the spaces between your neurons. So how does your brain avoid becoming a tiny, skull-encased landfill? This is where sleep comes in. In 2012, a team of researchers led by Dr. Macon Nedergaard discovered a stunningly elegant process they named the glymphatic system. Think of it as the brain's nighttime sanitation crew. When you fall into a deep sleep, your brain cells actually shrink by up to 60%, widening the channels between them. This allows cerebrospinal fluid to pump through your brain at high speed, flushing out all that toxic garbage that accumulated during the day. It's a deep cleaning power wash for your consciousness. Now, what happens if you never sleep? The sanitation crew never comes to work. Ever. The garbage trucks are on a permanent, indefinite strike. Day after day, the toxic sludge of beta amyloid and tau would just build up. At first, you just feel it as intense brain fog, an inability to focus, and crippling memory problems. You'd have the short-term recall of a goldfish with a concussion. You'd walk into a room and not just forget why you're there, but you might forget what a room even is. But it gets so much worse. This isn't just about feeling a little off. The long-term accumulation of this neural garbage is a direct pathway to rampant neurodegenerative disease. We wouldn't just see a rise in Alzheimer's and dementia. We'd see it in people in their 30s and 40s. Our brains, lacking the fundamental mechanism for self-cleaning, would essentially begin to rot from the inside out while we were still wide awake. Our evolution into a sleepless species would be a simultaneous evolution into a species doomed to profound early-onset dementia. You'd have all the time in the world to think, but a brain so clogged with its own filth that you couldn't form a coherent thought anyway. It's the ultimate ironic punishment, a mind that never turns off, but slowly ceases to work. What does the word night even mean in a world that never sleeps? Right now, it's a time of quiet, of rest, of relative darkness. But if humanity is up and about 24/7, then darkness isn't peaceful, it's an inconvenience. It's an obstacle to commerce, travel, and entertainment. And so, our first great project as a sleepless species would be a war against the night itself. We already do this on a small scale. It's called light pollution. Go to the center of any major city and look up. You might see the moon, a few planets, and maybe a dozen stars if you're lucky. You are being robbed of 99% of the cosmos by streetlights and office buildings. Now multiply that by 1,000. In a world without sleep, cities would blaze with the light of 1,000 suns all the time. There would be no dimming of the lights at 2 a.m. because there would be no downtime. The city that never sleeps would go from a nickname for New York to the literal description of every human settlement on Earth. Our homes would change too. The idea of a dark, cozy bedroom would become archaic. Why would you need blackout curtains when you're never trying to block out the sun to sleep? Windows would get bigger. Our ambient lighting would be perpetually bright. The soft, warm glow we associate with evening would be replaced by the harsh blue-white light of productivity, designed to keep us alert and focused forever. And what about everything else that lives on this planet with us? We're not the only ones who use the dark. Nocturnal ecosystems would utterly collapse. Sea turtle hatchlings, which use the moon's reflection on the water to find their way to the ocean, would instead scurry inland toward the blazing lights of a 24-hour beachside resort, where they would perish. Migratory birds who navigate by the stars would be hopelessly lost, flying in circles around eternally lit skyscrapers. The planet's billion-year-old rhythm of light and dark, the pulse that drives countless species, would be silenced by our species' new inability to just chill out for a few hours. We would gain the 24/7 convenience of being able to buy a Slurpee at 4 a.m. anywhere on the planet, and in exchange, we would have paved over the stars and evicted every creature of the night. Where do your best ideas come from? It's almost never when you're staring at a problem, grinding it out at your desk. It's in the shower, on a long, boring drive, the moment your head hits the pillow. It's when your conscious, logical brain finally gets out of the way and lets the weird, chaotic parts take over. This isn't a coincidence. It's a fundamental feature of how human creativity works, and it's a feature that is powered almost exclusively by sleep, specifically by REM sleep, the phase where your brain is going absolutely bonkers, creating vivid, nonsensical dreams. During REM, your prefrontal cortex, the logical, judging, that's a stupid idea part of your brain, takes a little nap. This allows your brain to access remote, bizarre associations it would never make in a waking state. It's a neurological sandbox for impossible ideas. This is why August Kekele could dream of a snake biting its own tail and wake up with the structure of the benzene ring, a breakthrough that changed modern chemistry. His waking mind was stuck, but his dreaming mind was free to be weird. So in a world without sleep, we don't just lose rest, we lose our primary engine for innovation. We would become creatures of pure, relentless logic. We'd be great at optimizing spreadsheets, finding slightly more efficient ways to do the things we already do, and solving straightforward, linear problems. But true leaps of creative faith, the kind of thinking that produces a starry night or a theory of relativity, that would become exceptionally rare, if not impossible. The default mode network in our brains, which activates when we're idle and daydreaming, is responsible for this kind of aha moment. But in our sleepless dystopia, there is no idle. There is no daydreaming. There is only focus, work, and engagement. We would have twice the time to solve the world's problems, but would have stripped our brains of the very tool needed for paradigm-shifting solutions. Our art would become derivative, our science incremental, and our culture stagnant. We'd live in a world of endless sequels and reboots, not just for our movies, but for our ideas too. We'd have all the time in the world and absolutely nothing new to do with it. Imagine being a kid in a world without sleep. At first, it sounds like a dream come true. No more bedtimes, no more being told to go to sleep when you're in the middle of a game. The playground never closes, the TV is always on, and you have an extra 8 hours a day to drive your parents completely and utterly insane. But the reality of a sleepless childhood would be less of a wonderland and more of a developmental disaster zone. Sleep is when a child's brain does its most important work. It's not off, it's in consolidation mode. Think of a kid's waking hours as a frantic librarian running through the stacks, grabbing every book they can find. Sleep is when the librarian actually sits down, reads the titles, and meticulously files each book on the proper shelf. This is how learning and memory formation works. Without sleep, the library of the mind becomes a chaotic pile of books on the floor. A child might be able to experience more, but they would learn less. Information would go in one ear and out the other with nothing sticking. School would become a nightmare of trying to cram facts into a brain that has no available storage space. Then there's the emotional component. We all know what an overtired toddler is like. They are the tiny, irrational, screaming epicenters of emotional chaos. That's because sleep, particularly REM sleep, is essential for processing emotions and regulating mood. It's like a nightly emotional reset button. Now remove that button, you get a child who is perpetually in that overtired state. The minor frustrations of childhood, a broken toy, the wrong color cup, would trigger nuclear-level meltdowns every single day. We would be raising a generation of humans with the emotional stability of a hornet in a jar. And it gets worse. The vast majority of human growth hormone, the stuff that literally makes kids grow, is released during deep sleep. Without that crucial hormonal surge each night, we might raise a generation that is not only emotionally volatile and learning impaired, but also physically stunted. In our attempt to create a 24/7 utopia for our kids, we would have engineered a childhood that is longer, but far, far worse in every way that actually matters. You tend to think of sleep as being all about your brain. It's the brain that gets tired, the brain that dreams, the brain that feels fuzzy after a bad night. But your body sees things very differently. For your heart, your immune system, and your muscles, sleep is the only time the factory floor shuts down for maintenance. It's the pit stop in the Grand Prix of existence. Taking that away is like trying to drive a Formula One car for 500 laps straight, ignoring the screaming pit crew waving you in for new tires and more fuel. The crash isn't a possibility, it's a mathematical certainty. Let's start with your immune system. Researchers have done studies where they deprive healthy people of sleep for just one night. After that single night, the activity of their natural killer cells, the elite special forces of your immune system that target cancerous and virus-infected cells, plummets by as much as 70%. In a perpetually sleepless world, your body's defenses would be permanently hobbled. You'd be exquisitely vulnerable to every passing cold, flu, and virus. Cancers that your immune system would normally assassinate in their infancy would be free to grow unchecked. We'd be a species with the collective immune system of a severely stressed out college student during finals week forever. Then there's your metabolism. Sleep is critical for regulating the hormones that control appetite, namely ghrelin, the I'm hungry hormone, and leptin, the I'm full hormone. Without sleep, ghrelin levels soar and leptin levels crater. So you would feel ravenously hungry all the time, even if your body didn't need the calories. Worse, your body's ability to process sugar would go right out the window, dramatically increasing your risk for type 2 diabetes. So let's paint the full picture. Our sleepless human is a walking medical disaster. They are immunocompromised, perpetually starving, hormonally unbalanced, and have blood pressure through the roof from a cardiovascular system that never gets a break. We would have evolved to escape the inconvenience of sleep, only to walk headfirst into a world of rampant chronic illness. We'd have more time to be alive, but we'd spend that time feeling progressively, unstoppably awful. So far, we've been assuming that this evolution to a sleepless existence is a universal upgrade, like opposable thumbs or the ability to binge watch an entire season of a show in one sitting. But what if it wasn't? What if this trait emerged in only, say, 10% of the population? What if the ability to never need sleep was a genetic lottery? Suddenly, we haven't created a new humanity. We've created a new species in a new, terrifying form of class warfare. Think about it. We already live in a world where a tiny head start can lead to a lifetime of advantage. Now imagine one group of people has a biological, unassailable, 8-hour head start on everyone else every single day. The sleepless would become the ultimate overclass. While the sleepers are unconscious for a third of their lives, the sleepless are working, studying, investing, inventing, and accumulating power. They can work 2 jobs while a sleeper works 1. They can earn 2 PhDs in the time it takes a sleeper to earn one. Within a single generation, the world would be irrevocably stratified. The sleepless would be the CEOs, the top scientists, the political leaders, the billionaires. The sleepers would be the permanent underclass, relegated to the jobs the sleepless don't want. And the worst part? The sleepless would believe they deserve it. They'd see their success not as a result of a genetic fluke, but as proof of their superior work ethic and ambition. They'd look at the sleepers and say, "Why are you so lazy? Why are you wasting a third of your life in bed?" This isn't just a dystopian fantasy. It's a reflection of how societies always treat perceived biological advantages. It would be social Darwinism on steroids. Laws might preach equality, but the economy wouldn't care. How do you compete with someone who has a 50% productivity advantage baked into their DNA? You don't. You fall behind. The gap between the haves and the have-nots would become an uncrossable chasm, defined not by wealth or education, but by the simple, brutal fact of who needs to close their eyes at night and who doesn't. In a world populated by hyperlogical, emotionally stunted, and creatively barren sleepless people, what becomes the ultimate luxury good? What is the one experience that is both priceless and impossible for them to have? A dream. The kahegi, nonsensical, terrifying, and beautiful narratives our brains spin for us every night would become a lost art form. And like any lost art, it would become incredibly valuable. This is where the remaining sleepers come in. They wouldn't just be a downtrodden underclass, they'd be a natural resource. Imagine a seedy underground dream den. A sleeper lies on a cot, hooked up to sophisticated brain-computer interfaces. In another room, a wealthy sleepless client pays an absurd amount of money to mainline the sleeper's REM cycle directly into their own consciousness. For a few precious minutes, they get to experience something their own brain is incapable of producing: raw, unfiltered nonsense. The terror of being chased by something with too many teeth. The euphoria of flying over a city made of cheese. The sheer baffling weirdness of having a conversation with their third-grade teacher, who was also a teapot. This dream market would be the ultimate form of psychic tourism. It would be an addiction for some, a status symbol for others. The rich would brag about the quality of their dealer, debating whether dreams from artists are more abstract or if dreams from accountants are more pleasantly boring. They would be chasing the ghost of a mental state their species had abandoned in the name of progress. It's a perfect, tragic embodiment of human nature. We take something fundamental, beautiful, and universal, the private cinema of the mind, and in our new advanced state, we figure out how to strip mine it from the poor to sell it as a novelty to the rich. We would have gained 30 years of waking life, but lost our souls in the process, only to find ourselves desperately trying to buy them back, one nightmare at a time. So after all of this, the nonstop work, the toxic brains, the dead ecosystems, the sick bodies, the dreamless art, and the class warfare, we have to ask the most important question. What was the point? The whole premise of a sleepless world, it is based on the idea of optimization. We identify our single greatest inefficiency that pesky need to lie down and drool for 8 hours, and we eliminate it. In return, we get a supercharged humanity, right? But that's the ultimate joke. The grand cosmic punchline. Eliminating sleep doesn't create a better human. It creates a broken machine. We would be trading away everything that gives our lives rhythm, texture, and meaning, all for the sterile promise of more time. Sleep is the forced punctuation in the run-on sentence of life. It's the hard reset that allows for soft feelings. It's the biological barrier that prevents work from consuming our entire existence. It's the vulnerability that reminds us we are animals, not just productivity units. The darkness it requires gives us an appreciation for the light. Think about it. Our brains only clean themselves when we sleep. Our creativity is unleashed only when our logical minds rest. Our bodies only repair themselves when we're in a state of suspended animation. Our very growth as children is powered by it. It turns out that this great inefficiency is the single most efficient system we have for long-term survival, learning, and health. It's not a bug, it's the most critical feature of the entire operating system. To evolve past sleep would be like a car evolving past the need for oil changes, or a computer evolving past the need for software updates. It sounds great until the engine seizes up and the whole system crashes. The final bitter irony is that a sleepless humanity, in its quest for 24/7 productivity, would become a stagnant, sick, and profoundly unhappy society that would eventually grind to a halt. We'd have all the time in the world, and we'd have squandered it by trying to save it. So it turns out the biggest waste of time in your life is actually the only thing holding it together. Your body's mandatory subscription to unconsciousness is non-negotiable for a reason. If you want to explore more bizarre ways your own biology is secretly running the show, make sure you're subscribed for the next one.